necessarily need to talk about housing for the poor, housing for the lower income class of Filipinos. And so what I did in order to prepare for this was to actually look at what has happened, not in the past 10 or 20 years, but in the past 50 years. And so we had first the president, which we call the dictator, in 1965 to 1986. And among the many things that Mr. Marcos did, he actually established the Human Settlements Ministry. He did bliss housing, some of which was for rent, some of which was for sale. He actually instituted the Board of Investments, which today is one of the, if not the only, body that provides housing incentives directly to the supply side of the equation. He established during his term National Home Mortgage, HDMF, ITEC, many other things that I think the whole page of this PowerPoint picture would be hard to not fill. And then of course we have the housewife, 1986 to 1992. We established the HUD-C, and under the HUD-C were the key shelter agencies we know today. But she also established the Local Government Code, which gave a lot of powers for the local governments to institute housing programs, housing reforms, in the sense of LGU housing for their beneficiaries. She also instituted the Board of Investments Investment Priorities Plan, which eventually will contain mass housing as part of income tax holidays and other grants. After the housewife came the general. And what did the general do? He instituted National Shelter Program, UHLP, HDLP, the CISFA law, the CMP, RA 7279, a lot of which were reforms actually looking back as far as 1965 and still in vogue or in play today. We have the actor whose short-lived presidential career was multi-window housing loan program. If you can see, President Ramos had the Unified Home Lending Program. We reformed that. We made that into multi-window lending during his time. And in this time also, we had something like EO 90. This was an executive order that prescribed for time limits for all the housing government and housing government-related permits. We had the Economist, and she did developer-originated finance. She was able to put mass housing finally in the IPP, relocated PNR, increased the socialized housing limits, many other things that she did for the housing sector, including attending all the conventions of housing associations for 6 years without fail. She had the perfect attendance, which gives you the confidence and the impression that she was really interested in using housing as a catalyst to prime the economy. And then you have the Scion. HDMF originated credit scoring. So that was a reform from HDMF developer originated finance. Now it's back to the agency to do its own evaluating credit scoring. They increased ceilings for socialized housing, low-cost housing. They extended rent control. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, this is just merely a few of the highlights of the massive number of reforms that we have been doing since 1965. My comment is, why are we still asking the same questions today? We say that all these reforms barely improve, they're unsustainable, they've got low beneficiary interest, limited coverage, we have to deal with increasing costs, LGU opposition, there's so many things. Professional squatting is an issue, we need to rationalize the taxes, we need a national resettlement policy, which last time I heard was already in place since 1965. So, CLUP updating systems, my favorite, housing beneficiary database. And of course, my other favorite, PPP, doesn't stand for PowerPoint presentation. It stands for partnerships between the private sector and the government. And so we've done a lot of reforms. I think the question is not what reforms we should do, it is what reforms haven't we done? Haven't we done? And so I spent, since I accepted the invitation, I spent all my free time just reading up from studies with, from government as well as private. And I presented it this way because, as I read, somehow it got more complicated. It got more confusing. It's a good thing I'm in formal housing, I think, because there seems to be a lot of issues and a lot of contentious points of view. I don't want to add more to the confusion, but let me now do something, let's say, to add to the perspective. Coming from somebody who has done mass housing, but in the formal sector, but targeting the typical, ordinary, middle class and lower middle class working Filipino and his family. Okay? We are proud to say that we provide housing for the backbone of Philippine commerce and industry. We provide housing for our office mates, for our church members, for our employees who are actually the backbone of our accounting system, front lines for our tellers. We have waiters in our subdivisions living, few entrepreneurs like barbers. We're looking at salespeople, route salesmen. Our buyers are also factory workers. We have a few licensed professionals, nurses, engineers who also live in our subdivision. We have a few lawyers, and we hope that they stay few in our subdivisions. But so it's now a varied, multidisciplinary community that we aim to achieve. And we are able to successfully do this because one of the principles that we've realized doing business in mass housing this long is that a truly effective and sustainable program for housing must ultimately be grounded on, and we need to understand the realities and the psychology of how our target market behaves. When I was looking at the studies that are available, I wanted to see very well the studies on who our target market is, and how we can use what we know about the attitudes and the aspirations and the value system and their behavioral patterns in order to craft a housing policy that will fit them perfectly. We have actually done so in our mass housing program, and I will show you now our template, and maybe we can use this so that we can understand our customer better. So the important thing for our side as a business is this: we have to know our customer really well. Because only then can we craft a program that's actually going to be successful, not for just them, but for us as a business. We saw that in the mass housing market, there were three values that were very apparent. Number one, our market is deeply aspirational. They want to move from their current state, which is renters, which is non-asset owners, and they want to move up in society by becoming asset owners, by becoming owners of the residences they live in. In a sense, transforming rental expense into a monthly amortization or a payment for an asset they will eventually own. But they're practical. They have value for money. They have value for money characteristics. And so you have to give them a product that actually works for them in terms of looking at it from the value appreciation point of view. One of the things that I realized about housing has one of the biggest perceptions of value. Because not only is the house made up of mortars and bricks, but it's made up including the dreams and aspirations and what perceives to be the hard work of the customers that are buying it. Plus their goals for their family, plus the approval of their in-laws. It's all there when they buy a house. That's why actually when you look at it, buying a house or being awarded a house, in the case of beneficiaries, is also somewhat a complicated, emotional, and psychological dynamic that goes on. And we need to understand that if we really want to address the actual need of our target market. But because our market is young, they're also optimistic about the future. And one of the reasons why mass housing works is because our buyers they all perceive that in 10 or 20 years, I will be better than where I am now. And therefore, what I buy today might be difficult for me to sustain in terms of monthly amortization, but if I continually do that, I get promoted, I get married, and therefore single family becomes double family income, etc. My sister's going abroad, so she's going to give me money because she loves me, etc. So what we're just saying is this: that idea of an optimistic future drives people to acquire housing. Now, are we able now to actually use that concept and apply it to housing for the poor? What are the future aspirations of the market that we want to serve? Because that aspect bears on greatly to their decisions to buy a house or to acquire a house today. So with these values, we now come to the actualization of what our market demographics are. They're young. My market is college educated. They have stable jobs. They're earning gross family. In other words, the whole family system. One of the things that we do is we don't do individual income verification, because that's a realization of how a family, today's Filipino modern middle class, lower middle class family does earn its money. It's now a multiple source income. Some formal, a lot of it informal. And so, but that forms part of the household's cash flow. At the end of the day, we want to see how cash flow is done. And if in the cash flow they can afford the monthly amortization, I guess we can do the same thing for housing for the poor, because they do have cash flows. It's just that we need to understand the cash flows and the characteristics of those cash flows in order to craft it's a relevant housing finance policy for them. They're also renters. They're not asset owners. And they have little or no savings. Very important. Because Filipinos, they like malls. They don't like banks. Therefore, you do not expect, and therefore you do not expect the market to have a lot of money for equity. So these are the realities. And if we're able to get these realities of this market, how they behave, how they live, how they work, how they make money, how they spend it, how they budget it, then the result is a housing program that's really relevant to those people that we want to target. Taking all this, our business model does now have three components. And I think for any housing builder or home builder like ours, these three components have to be in place. Also, I think for housing policy, a comprehensive housing policy has to have these three things in place. First is that you have production, okay? And then you have housing finance, and then you have collection, okay? And you can now innovate based on these three basic elements, because you will understand that these three elements have to come into play at the same time. They have to be synchronized. They have to be complementary. And I will show this later. They have to be synergized. In other words, if you take them all apart, they seem to be inadequate or cannot be sustained. One of the things that I had criticisms before is that since I'm the only developer in the country today that does a 2% down payment, they're saying that I'm too risky and I'm not sustainable. But you know, if you add it together with all the other components of our business model, you can see that they synergize together. And the resulting effect is one of stability. So we need to see all these components as one, but more importantly, as a whole. The studies that I've read coming into this discussion was that there's a lot of discussion on housing finance and then in production, but it's got to be somehow integrated into one business model. At the end of the day, kasi, if you want to spur housing, you have to look at housing as a manufacturing concern. It's not a property development concern. It's not even a social dimension concern. At the end of the day, if you want more houses, I'm saying, you know, I've been telling my friends, the only solution to a lack of homes is to build more homes. And therefore, to look at housing as a manufacturing concern. In other words, the government, and this is where it gets controversial for me. For example, the government can buy a manufacturing facility that produces precast panels, and then from that now gets economies of scale so that they can just deliver panels all over the city or all over the country. If you really want to do housing, you understand. So it's the way of perceiving it. It's home building is a manufacturing process. Therefore, the basic manufacturing rules should apply. Economies of scale, lowering factors of production, having quality control, etc. And in a controlled and regulated factory assembly environment. Now, the 8990 business model, there's three parts, and therefore I have now described it into three groups. The first is resource allocation, and that is about our production. We do precast housing. Okay, we can do a house in 8 days. I now have 15,000 units of capacity. The nice thing about precast technology is this: it lends itself to economies of scale. And so as you become bigger, building more and more panels, you will see that your average costs actually start to go down because the high input costs are now shared by a large number of output materials. We should somehow try to do the same if we want to produce more houses. We should get some technology and then tweak it and make it applicable to ourselves, making sure that that technology is able to provide us the economies of scale so that we can efficiently just bring out the houses like a manufacturing concern. Bring out the houses so that our average costs will now go down. Our fixed costs will now get averaged downwards. This is now complemented with accessible in-house financing. This is one of the innovations of 8990 or Deca Homes. We are the only ones that provide in-house financing at 2% of the equity. We have the lowest rate at 9.5%. We have the longest terms in-house at 25 years. Okay, but we mitigate this by doing a 30% gross family income rule for a monthly amortization and a minimum of 35,000 gross family income for the low-cost housing units. What I just want to emphasize is this: whatever housing finance program we do, first we should look at what the market needs, craft the housing finance policy first, and then mitigate it after. What I'm experiencing these days, especially in informal housing, is that the banks or the government, they actually mitigate something first. They mitigate the concept first, and after the mitigation, you now craft the housing policy. That is why the down payment is 20%. But if you do the reverse, you say, what is the housing policy that this market really needs? We know that they don't have savings. So why ask from them something they don't have? Diba? So you do a reality check and you do a 2% down payment. Diba? And then you mitigate it, the result is the 2% down payment. So if you can just reverse the thought process, first finding out what the market needs, what the market really can afford, and then you mitigate it, then you have something going. If you're interested why our setup is like this, and by the way, my in-house finance at 2% down payment gives me a performing accounts ratio of 97%. Because the third one is very important. The third aspect of the business model, you've got to have a collection and a credit platform. This is what's missing in all this UHLP, this MWLP. That's why National Home closed. That's why we were having problems with the funding agencies, because while they were very good at lending it out, they weren't very good at collecting the money to come back in, to get plowed into new funds for housing finance. What we're doing is this, and it's called behavioral economics. The objective of the collection department is not to collect. And so when I told that to my developer friends, they almost fell off their chairs. Says, what? You just contradicted yourself, they said. I said no. Because if the objective of the collection department is to collect, then that means the more buyers I have, the more collectors I need to employ. But you see, it's not about collection. It's about behavior modification. We've realized that our market not only needs to know how much to pay, but they also need to know why they should pay. And more importantly, they need to know how they will pay. That is why we are the only developer I know that requires our buyers to undergo a half-day seminar, which we call the Buyer's Orientation Seminar, where we explain to them the legal, the financial obligations, but more importantly, we want to educate them on why they need to pay. And the reason of this is simple. You need to pay because you're not paying only for your house. I am telling them, we are all here trying to buy a house because we now have more money in our pocket. We now have more disposable income. Okay? You don't need to believe the other people talking that our country is in bad shape, everything. It cannot be denied. We've been growing for the past decades, and that has finally trickled down to the middle class. That's why we're having good sales everywhere, in real estate, in consumer goods, etc. So, my buyer, he has some money in his pocket. The question is, how is he going to spend it? I tell my buyers, you know, you can spend it. All this disposable income you have, you can buy a brand new cell phone every month for the next 10 years, making you the most popular guy in your office. Or if you're tired with cell phones, you can actually buy every month for the next 10 years one new pair of shoes, and you will be the talk of the town in your church group. If you're tired with that, you can buy a brand new bag every month for the next 10 years. But the question is, after buying all that every month for 10 years, did those purchases make you rich? But what if you are able to get all this consumption expenditure, budget your monthly take-home pay to the extent that you are able to afford religiously every month for the next 10 years a monthly amortization on a real estate property in the Philippines that you have bought for the socialized housing price of 450,000 in 10 years. Do you know how much that real estate property will cost? I will tell you, sure more than 1 million pesos. And I'm being conservative. Therefore, what have we done? We have allowed or used the vehicle for housing to make our buyers millionaires. We have made our target market acquire this house. And because now they understand that there are only a few things in this life or in the Philippines that can make you rich, one of them is property. Now, if you religiously pay it, then this financial liberation can be yours. That's what I tell them. That is why when my buyers understand this, they will beg, they will borrow, hopefully not steal. Okay, their monthly amortization to pay. Because it's more than just housing. We are providing financial security in the long term. And I think housing for the poor is the same. Diba? So that's why maski malayo siya, you know, I've always had problems with the thing that, oh, the poor doesn't want to go to this part because it's far from their work. You know, I have buyers in Cavite, in our project in Bella Vista, who live in Makati, and they commute every day. And so I say, there's a disconnect there somewhere. Diba? Kasi why do one group of people experiencing the same far commute will gladly do it, but some other demographic of Philippine society won't? So it's something that we need to study first and understand before we can truly relate to this market. But what I'm saying is this, whatever the market is, be it poor, low cost, mid cost, everything, if they understand that property is the way to go in order to get out of poverty, then I would have done my part as a mass housing developer. Okay, so that's why, in a nutshell, that's what I tell them. That seminar's 4 hours. Okay, yeah, but I'm not going to do that to you. And then, so, okay, so they understand, okay, we understand it. Sabi ng mga buyers ko, okay, we understand it. What are we going to do next? I will teach you how. And so my orientation seminar has a budgeting component. So I will tell you, okay, let's get out your payslip and then let's do a workshop. So that you can see the possible ways by which you can transfer expense into monthly amortization investment. And so if you play around with that, I don't know if housing for the poor carries an educational component. I think that it does. Because a lot of the problems we don't have is because we have seminars for our homeowners. One of the seminars that we do is before you move into your house, I have a buyer's move-in seminar. With your dog and what you can and cannot do in your house, what permits you have to get, etc. But more importantly, it is also a reminder that now that you have your home, your primary duty to your family is to make sure that your monthly amortization is paid. So it's all about that. It's all about behavior economic. One of the things that Deca Homes has is it's got really good amenities for mass housing. We have 2 wakeboard parks. We have a third coming on the way. One in Visayas, one in Mindanao. Another one, one in Luzon, one in Mindanao, and another one coming in the Visayas. We have swimming pools, basketball courts, clubhouses. I even have a football field in Davao for my homeowners. We have mga rowing inspired by Burnham Park in Baguio. Those kinds of things. But what we're saying is this. These amenities are free to my homeowners if their account is paid on time. And therefore, you are now able to link a certain desirable objective towards a behavior you want them to use. I think that that's one of the things that we can do in order to preserve the sustainability of housing for the poor, looking at how our market or our intended beneficiaries act. So a lot of behavior modification, a lot of behavioral economics. They say, okay, if you do this, then we will do this for you in terms of housing. Or in order to get this housing, you need to do this. And I'm sure foundations like Habitat will actually have some sort of behavioral economics playing around. And maybe we need more of that in order to make the beneficiaries grow and understand why housing is important. Because of that, we were able to grow exponentially. In 1989, when Deca Homes started, we started with a gross revenue of 189 million. We did about 300 houses. Today, after 10 years, in 2015 or 2014, we did almost 8 billion. We're going to do 10 billion this year. We have an earnings growth of about 253% in that span, 42 times because of the principles that I have mentioned today. What we need is a framework by which we can do exponential growth housing, because that's the only way. I was computing. We have an annual budget this year of 2.6 trillion. How much that is devoted to housing? I think it's only 11 billion. I think the national budget and the the presidential scion can do better than that. So we're trying to build 11,000 homes this year with a 20% growth. I want to leave you with my favorite slide. All of us have heroes and people we look up to. This is one of the people I look up to. He is responsible for many things we take for granted today. For example, the 5-day work week, he was the one who first implemented that. 8 hours per day work, he was the one who implemented that. But I like him for what he said and what he did. He said, I will build a car that's large enough for the family, but small enough for an average person to take care of it. I will use the best materials, hire the best men, and use the simplest designs but the most modern that engineering today can devise. But he said, I will price it so low that anybody who's earning a salary can afford to buy one. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what we are all about. That is what mass housing is all about, and I hope that is what housing for the poor is all about. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And then based on the survey, then you have some qualified beneficiaries, and then these are the people who have signified they want to live there. And so, well, without knowing too much, there has been a change of behavior. I always go back to that. There's been a change of behavior. And so we have to pinpoint why. Maybe they weren't informed. Maybe they weren't informed of the place. They just heard that, oh, there's housing and we're the beneficiary. They just signed up. And then the reality kicks in, and then I don't like to live there. And maybe that's why. But I go back to the fact that we look at the market as a behavioral mechanism. It's a behavioral environment. And so we want certain behaviors to come out. And therefore our programs, our standard operating procedures, even our systems must revolve around making sure that the desired behavior that we come out of the market will be there. And so I would be interested to know, why has there been a change of behavior? Why before they actually said yes, now they don't? So when 1,000 who didn't come, diba? And then ask them, oh, how come you're not moving? Did we miss anything? Diba? Baka all it needs is a shuttle. And then let's provide some. Diba? Maybe it's as simple as that. Truth is.
I think one of the reasons is that they have a very good brochure. Brochure. Nice looking brochure, and it looks like a very nice place. And another thing, and then most of the houses are foreclosed because of the non-remittance of monthly payment. And another thing is, it's probably they need a shuttle.
Yeah, baka it's too far. Okay, with regards to the brochure, kaya nga maganda yung New Age and you've got to register your advertisement. Kasi nga, di ba, you have to be truthful. And that's why we also have, that's one of the reasons why we have our own orientation. Kasi we have a lot of sellers. They might be promising everything. Di ba, whatever, some palace there, ganyan. So, it is now an opportunity for the institution or the agency to actually manage expectations. We tell them, oh, this is what you're going to get, and you're hearing it from us. Diba? So forget what the sales talk is, diba? But and then are your responsibilities. You have to pay this, diba? But you're pre-qualified. We know you can pay. We want to show you why you can pay and how. So, merong components na ganun. I realize that sometimes, especially in this market where we are, we need to hold the hand of our buyer. Okay, there's one of the things that I realize is that sometimes poor people make poor mistakes, not because of anything else, but simply because of a lack of information. Diba? That if the information was available, then we can count on them to actually do the right thing, which is pay the monthly amortization, not put garbage in their to tie their pets in the subdivision, yung mga ganon. I think that at the end of the day, they just weren't told. And so we now establish an environment in our office, in our branches, that allows us to to communicate with our buyers in many ways. We have one of the largest community billboards inside our subdivisions, as big as billboard spaces. Not as big, diba? Not even as big as this, bigger community. So that if there's an announcement, you know, everybody can understand. Sometimes the community billboard kasi is as small as you know, this TV screen is even bigger eh. Diba? And yet you're catering to 5,000. Diba? So small things like that actually help. I understand. You know, I realize in this market, you have to touch this market many times. Eh. Diba? And so it's not enough that you know, you saw them when they're buying. No, you have to touch them many times eh, in order for you to establish some sort of institutional relationship. So I guess that's also part of it. And then, you know, they don't pay because there's no comprehensive credit and collection platform. You know, that's very important. We spent a lot of resources there. One of the resources is a database. We have a customer database that actually logs a lot of our experiences, not just demographics, but their complaints are all there, their praises are all there, and the experiences we have with the customers, they're all in that database. So that I can do analytics. So that I can understand if the demographics of the market is changing. And the same way too, kasi you need to, in order to come up with these three values of aspiration, value for money, optimism, that's part of the analytics. And so I think, you know, housing for the poor, we've got to understand how the poor think. Why just providing housing may not be enough, or what else do they need in order for them to understand what housing is all about. Thank you.
The poor, just for them to invest in the house, etc. But once they start moving in, we all know the experience of other developers is once they start moving in, parang tingin nila, oh, I already have a house, but it doesn't end there. Can you give us an idea on how Deca Homes or how 8990 deals with its property management? Because I know with in terms of housing, we do mass housing, so it's a really daunting task on not just the equity payments, but how do we collect the monthly amortization? How do we convince them of that?
So we've already attached it to the monthly amortization payment, for example, so that it's already paid for. So that one works. And so for me, diba, if you have it and it's not collected, be the good guy, suspend it. Diba? And get something out of it. We will suspend it if you will organize your garbage very neatly so that we can pick it up efficiently. So you then attach it to a behavior. So again, I go back to behavior. Yes, property management is something that we do, and it's handled by our branch office. So the engineering department has a separate department called the accounts management group. So account, because we treat all the units as one account. Therefore, if there's any complaints, that's been done. Any roads to be fixed, they actually do it. We make sure that the water is available. If not, then that group is the one that provides the water by contracting some water company to supply it. That kind of thing. And then we make sure that we actually give back to our projects in terms of we can build churches, we can build daycare centers, we can build. I've donated 2 police outposts so that there's a security presence in the subdivision without me having to pay for additional security guards. Diba? So just build one. Anyway, I'm a developer, so I'm a builder. I know how to build stuff cheaply. So I'm going to build a nice police substation, donate it to the PNP. Oh, I get the medal pa. And then, I have 24-hour security. That matters, di ba? Oh, and I don't need to pay additional security guards. Mga ganyan. Housing for the poor. Your interaction with the target market never stops. And therefore, since I have daycare centers, then I can actually introduce certain health advocacies as well in the community. And all of this naman is voluntary, all of this is free. I need to add this nga pala. So, I'm doing all this, and of course, it costs money. Where do I get it? I get it from the penalties and fines. Diba? So, I don't make money out of penalties and fines. Okay? I get it, and then I somehow plow it back, you know. My last plow back was that I gave all my homeowners nationwide garbage cans. That were 3 garbage cans as multicolored. So and so if I keep on doing that, then you know, my advocacies will also be there. At the same time, it's not costing anything from the top line income. See, so but I just got to find a way by which I can continue to do this.